For this award and honor, I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to do my 2012 student exchange at Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University in South Africa, 2011 application. So I received / earned this spot. There was only one spot for this, and it was kind of, there was a written and in-person application and interview process that was in 2011 to study abroad. I did 6 months student visa, January to June 2012, and so before I got my visa, I had to get approved for the student exchange. And we only had one spot for our university, and when we were interviewing, and I was at the University of Washington in Seattle, and as a student, and so when we were interviewing, there were group interviews for the study abroad programs, and the student exchange is a form of study abroad. And so when we were interviewing, they didn't know yet if there was a student in Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University, which is where I exchanged with, and they didn't actually know at that point in time if they would be able to send someone. There had to be a match in numbers. So if there were no interested people or nobody who qualified to study abroad at the University of Washington, then none of us would get to go. And if there was only one person, then only one of us would get to go. And so that one person was me. And so it's an honor, I would say, because they selected me to represent the university. It's a bit different than like a school stuff thing, in the sense of this one felt like a bit of an honor. And when I went to live in South Africa, it was very much something I wore, so to speak, where like kind of like some people who win a prestigious enough award might present themselves as a winner or laureate of a certain prize or award or whatever. I presented myself as a student of the university, and the university selected me to go. There was an application for me. However, the feel of the student exchange was a bit different than just being admitted to a university kind of thing. So that's why it's in the awards and honors playlist. Or I'm putting this in the awards and honors playlist, this video and this item. And so specifically, it was a 2012 student exchange at Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University in Port Elizabeth, South Africa. And my study abroad student exchange program was through the University of Washington in Seattle, and the student exchange part meant I attended university, Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University in South Africa, and someone from South Africa, Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University, attended the University of Washington campus I normally did. So it's an exchange, one student for one student. I went to South Africa, and somebody from South Africa attended the University of Washington. The application cycle was in 2011 and consisted of written and in-person applications as interview components. So I'm going to order this before the student visa in my awards and honors playlist, because 2011 was the year I applied, interviewed, was accepted, started going through the medical screening, started getting all of the paperwork, started the visa stuff, none other than the paperwork, getting it sent out and that kind of stuff, and getting the vaccinations. There was a medical screening too, like physical and stuff like that. There was a lot of stuff that had to be done once I got accepted. There was a lot of work, and it was fun. But the application process, so it was actually the second study abroad. It was the study abroad I really wanted, but it was the second one I applied to, and I'm happy I applied to another one. So the first one I applied to was to Istanbul, Turkey, and I did not make that. I was very happy I did that one. Like I would have loved to have studied abroad in Istanbul, Turkey, but my number one was Africa. And of the programs offered, South Africa was the best fit. There was like Morocco, was there Egypt at that point in time, and like South Africa for a student exchange. And I had always been a childhood dream to live in Africa, and I really loved the animals and the people and stuff like that. And so for the animals component, South Africa was the best fit of the countries offered. And so in that sense, South Africa was my number one, but I also did apply for study abroad in Istanbul, Turkey, and I did not get accepted to that program. And I was very happy I did it, because the interviews, so there's the submitting materials, and that kind of thing for the application. And then there's more materials if one gets accepted. And once the materials are kind of submitted, there's a second round, perhaps is ways phrasing it, is group interviews. And I started working. I interviewed for my first job when I was like approximately 14 years old, and started working when I was 14 years old. So I was familiar with the interview process. However, I was not familiar with the group interview process, which is different than like a question and answer or a debate or a mock summit in a group setting. We sat at a table, or sat in a room together, and there was an interviewer, and we were all given the same exact question, which is a very interesting format for an interview, because depending on where one is in the answer line, you might get to hear everybody's answer before you go, or you might go first. You get to see how much the answers overlap between people, that kind of thing, or if there is an overlap. So I thought it was a great way to learn about those of us who are applying, and how different we could be. And for me, but I was unfamiliar with it, so I was happy I had the Istanbul, Turkey, to see kind of and go through the process of, I'm not familiar with this. Okay. I didn't change my tactics or approach, so to speak. It was speak my truth for the place I'm applying, and it worked for South Africa and did not work for Turkey, kind of thing. And so that was, I think, actually very useful. And I did that one. So I think the Istanbul, Turkey one was like in the spring or the winter 2011, which is like January to March, and then I applied for the South Africa one like March to June 2011. But then the paperwork was over the summer. It was something like that. It was pretty early, pretty far in advance, because there's so much paperwork to do through the university, the medical stuff, the visa stuff. It wasn't last minute by any means. Like a visa can take like months to clear. So it wasn't like I was interviewing in autumn of 2011 for January 2012. I interviewed multiple terms in advance. And I think it was spring. It might have been summer, but I think it was spring. Yeah. So that was a bit about the application process. And then the student exchange itself was, we were treated a bit by our university, and even I lived in a compound, so to speak, with other international students and some South Africa students. International, there was a lot of Europe, a lot of Africa outside of South Africa, which was very kind of cool. And then North America as well, and there was some Asia, but not as much Asia. And so it was interesting, because it was perhaps the time in my life where country and university actually mattered kind of more than like the person at times. Everybody from a different country had different paperwork, and I learned there was a bunch of people from Germany, and even from the United States of America, and I learned like the processes for different universities was very different as well. So what initially I was just like, okay, it's a student exchange. I learned once I was in South Africa that the title of University of Washington and the title of Washington State and / Seattle and the title of United States of America was like front line for my social interactions, and I was like, that was not what I was expecting, right? Like whatsoever. So this is talking about receiving / earning it, and I didn't get it stripped away while I was there, right? I didn't get deported back to the United States of America. There were like some people who flirted with that. Some of the Minnesotans were like, we're gonna go out and we're gonna do blah 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 blah, and they're like, you guys are gonna get yourself deported back to America, and they're like, no, we're not, and stuff like that. So I chose the good conduct is best to my ability kind of approach, but it really was kind of receiving and earning an honor through the application process, but also in terms of like retaining it, right? It's something that could be taken away during the course of the term away, and it was not. So in that sense, receiving / earning, the receiving kind of coming from, well, and not just the application process, but getting the, well, that's the first step, right? And then the second part is getting the visa approved. So I get approved by the university and then the United States government. Right? So there was a multi-acceptance level of she's going to represent us internationally at another university in Africa and that kind of stuff. And somebody's coming to the United States of America representing that African institution. Right. So yeah. So it was an interesting. Oh, the visa part was, and the student exchange was just like they only approved me, and then South Africa had to get their person approved, and kind of thing, through their own government and that kind of stuff. So yeah. So that's a bit about that. It's less about my day-to-day life, but perhaps more about the thing itself, the student exchange and the application itself, and then that actually mattered in my social interactions a lot, to the point of it being my front line, whereas I did not really even like, it was like, okay, I know how to introduce myself, but I didn't think that would continue to be the story, kind of, so to speak, for all January to June. So that was, I thought, kind of interesting. Yeah, so that's a bit about that. Happy day of filming, Monday, 25 September 2023, in community of Innisartan, city of Shoreline, Washington State, United States of America. Wait. Innisartan community, city of Shoreline, King County, Washington State, United States of America, planet Earth, the original, as of filming this, Monday, 25 September 2023, and happy time of viewing whenever you are viewing this.